Namaste and welcome to another episode of A Questioning Mind. And I'm so happy today to have Khalid Baig with me. He's been on the channel before. He was one of the first few guests who agreed to come, and I'm glad to call him a friend now. Khalid, very welcome. Happy Janmashtami. Namaste.
Thank you. Namaste. Happy Janmashtami to everyone celebrating, and good to see your channel growing. And I was amongst the initial ones who had come, so good to see you going from strength to strength.
Absolutely, Khalid. It's been so nice to have the kind of reception that this channel has had. So many guests agreeing to come, and thank you for being one of the first. And I'm glad we can do this again now. It's been in the works for quite a while, so thanks for making the time.
Most welcome.
All right, Khalid. So you have grown immensely as a YouTuber yourself. You know, when we first met, you were just sort of starting out, and now your channel has thousands of subscribers. Apart from your Twitter presence, you being on other channels, you've gone on to have a very regular production schedule for yourself as well. How has the journey been for you?
Yeah, it's been very encouraging. Me and my YouTube partner Amana Begum Ansari decided to, in our own small way, try to make a better India, have a more, a nationalistic perspective, sans shouting and rhetoric, a more nuanced take, and speak some very strong truths to to the ideological opponents, and also question whatever earlier lot of status quo was there. So I think we've been lucky that way. People have been very supportive. We started in November. In 8 to 9 months, we've reached around 13,000 subscribers, and it's been a good reception. We've even always welcomed the positive, respectful critique as well. So that keeps us growing. So now it's a bi-weekly thing. India This Week by Amana and Khalid, and that's the name of the channel, and where we discuss issues surrounding India. Sometimes also global issues and all. So that's the more or less the texture of the YouTube show that we run.
So, Khalid, I'm going to keep today's episode relatively lighter because I know you do a lot of politics, and even though you mix in a lot of sarcasm on your channel,
Right.
it's kind of gets heavy sometimes, I'm sure. So let's keep this a little focused on your YouTube journey as well. So I know you started off with a let's see how this worked out, and then you committed to it. I think you record at least twice a week now, and you have the results to show for it. And this is supposed to be the creator economy. I think there's been a couple of other guests with who we've discussed this. So in this sort of economy, I know 13,000 is probably not that much to make it an economic factor for you, but in general, how do you see the reception to it, and how does having a best friend for a partner help you do this and stay committed to the process? You're not looking at results and money and all of that.
No, I mean, we had never factored in the money and the financial aspect of it. I mean, it started off as a passion project. Me and Amina, we share a ideological worldview where we share a very close bond and conviction with regards to our love for India, for what we believe how nationalism and patriotism should be. And we are ready to engage with the cross spectrum of voices, be it left or right. Luckily, whatever steps or goal posts you had to reach to have a sort of a little bit of a monetization from Google AdSense, which is not much. It's not anything, to be honest, like a small pocket money. That started coming in after the fourth or fifth month itself. But of course, anything like that does help you. A lot of people have also asked us to put up a UPI and a number where they can contribute. But we are so busy with our jobs, which are actually our core jobs, that we don't even get the time for that. But hopefully in a week or two that should also come up. But yeah, the process, the most important thing is to enjoy the process. The most important thing is to figure out whether you really like it, and you can take out your extra time post work, and also be very dedicated to it, because then your audience base also has expectations from you. We are not into sensationalism. We are not into trying to get something where the numbers will go into millions. We hope that happens. There have been some videos which have reached close to 50,000 views, so we are lucky and thankful for that. But we are happy. We're very satisfied, and we think we are in a niche segment and we're trying to bring in something noble and something very intellectually depth, and where anybody can have a conversation and we can go across even the harshest of ideological walls. So, but yeah, at the same time, one should be as a, I mean, I can't give a view because just been myself a 8 9 month old YouTuber, but you should know what you like, what is your passion. We have like a cross spectrum from reviewing Laal Singh Chaddha to what's happening in Sri Lanka to Pakistan's crisis to speaking about the human mind to understanding Sharia and Islam to many things to Muslim mindset. So we cover everything and anything as long as we feel that we want to talk about this topic. So I think yeah, that's how it is. And of course, like I said, Amna and me over the years, we like family now, and our ideological goals are in alignment. What we wish, what we can add to India, that's the debt we feel sort of because the country has been so wonderful to us. So that's how we see it. So that obviously helps. But the best thing is that even what the viewers see is that even within us, even though we fall on the same side of the ideological divide, we don't agree on everything. So even if you see our shows, it's not like
Yes,
we
yes.
will be parroting the same thing. The core values are similar. That we will always resist the uh, inimical forces, which are wanting to destroy this great civilization. So that is very clear. But rest within that, we have our own minds, and we don't try to influence or overpower each other on that.
So you've mentioned a few lovely points, and I did want to ask you about a few things that you mentioned. One being the episode about Laal Singh Chaddha, and your reviews were quite different from each other, but that's something I want to come to later. And about your nationalism as a debt to a nation that's given you a lot. I think that's a lovely aspect of a true democracy, because if it is a government for the people, that the people do need to be involved. You, as influencers in your space, are giving back. And perhaps there's a lot of commentary about how I pay my taxes and so I'm giving back already. But, then there's a lot of expectation from the state, and the citizen participation is much, much lower than it should be, I think, in a democracy where not everything is perfect right now. And when we're looking for that perfection from the state, perhaps, people should think like you and think about paying that back to the nation. So I think in the on 75 years of independence, I think that's we've come a long way to see younger folk like you think like that. I think that's a lovely thought to leave the audience with. So all right, one question that I have about your channel. I've seen it bringing in a lot of other Muslim nationalists from the country, uniting them, giving them a platform. A lot of them are very young, very talented, not just in terms of being influencers and thoughtfulness, but Omar plays the instruments in a lovely way. They're very talented in their own different ways. So, do you see this, the second largest majority of the nation, finally having some space to, voice thoughts that are different from the mainstream and how they are portrayed in the mainstream?
Yes, yes. We've played a very small role in bringing a lot of them to the forefront, whether that's an Umar Ghazi, who's an alumni of Aligarh Muslim University, a nonconformist when it comes to the traditional school of thought in religion. He was also, I don't know if a lot of people know this, hounded out of Aligarh some years back because of a false blasphemy charge that was laid at his doorsteps and had to run away with his family. Uh,
Wow.
that's how you can see how dangerous blasphemy is, because once you're marked out, you're marked out. Luckily, he survived, his family survived, but they went through hell for a lot of months. But like I said, he took the intellectual challenge to the idea and philosophy of those religious Muslim scholars who shaped up a pan Islamist, pan nationalistic worldview, which is an antithesis to the idea of India, and also those who subtly or covertly or overtly support the idea of Pakistan even today within the boundaries of India. And hence, he became their nemesis, and then they found a reason to, kind of target him, but he's bounced back stronger, and he speaks about a united India. He speaks has a very sharp intellectual and scholarly depth to
Mm,
him. There's Zeba Zoria is also there. She's another girl from Assam, youngster who's
mm,
been, making a lot of waves and great oratory skills, fierce, passionate lawyer, makes some very strong
mm,
arguments, knows her stuff. There's a scholar who, is an explorer in the field of Islamic literature, which is Tahir Anwar. He speaks about a lot of moderation, living together with, Hindus, and a lot of respect and celebration he does of his Hindu culture. A lot of people, Faiz Ahmed Faizi, who's a Pasmanda,
mm,
lower
mm,
caste Indian Muslim, he's making people realize and uh, about that issue. Amana herself is a lower caste Indian Muslim, which
mm,
I also a lot of years back didn't know. Uh, so these are just few of the names, and there are many others. There is one guy called Atif Iqbal from US. He
mm,
does his own YouTube channel. He speaks passionately about Indian interests first. There's a guy called Zahak Tanveer from Saudi Arabia who
mm.
operates out of Saudi
Sorry.
Arabia. Yeah, he runs I guess a news website as well. Very
Mm,
nationalistic, very patriotic. He brings in the international side of it.
mm,
There's of course veterans like Arsha Malik who have resisted the
mm.
separatism in the valley, and even before the internet was there. So
Absolutely.
that's heroic stuff. And the best part is that, like I had mentioned, these 10, 20 names once in my tweet also, they don't agree with each other on everything.
Mm,
But what they agree with is the love for India and how the territorial integrity and civilizational ethos is something they will always stand up to the enemy, right? That way you can see them as people within the
mm,
country, people, guarding the sovereignty within. You have the
mm,
army at the borders, but these are people without uniform doing the same within. So, yeah, I think it's the best time for non-conformist, rationalist, secularist, patriotic Indian Muslims to now speak up and ensure that whatever is in their capacity to ensure that the flare up between the largest and the second largest community can be minimized, because our side needs voices like this which need a critical mass to take on our
mm.
extremists. The majority community has those voices and they've had their share of reforms. So it's a great time for Indian Muslim voices as such.
I'm really glad to hear that. And all of the names that you mentioned, you're very right that nobody has to agree 100%, except you understand who is the hostile factor. I think Raja Manib, who was on my channel, he's also a Kashmiri Muslim who,
Yes, his
right,
he his geopolitical knowledge and the way he
absolutely.
takes on the separatist discourse of the separatist
Mm.
militants is very nice. It is very, 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 what I say, a very, very, uh, um, someone who's very adept at his work as a journalist, and
Mhm.
his pieces always educate you a lot, and he does it from the ground, so that is even more incredible. So, so there are like voices like that, and you can later even maybe share that tweet of mine in the link with that
Absolutely,
particular
absolutely.
tweet that I put with all their names. And I mean, I've spoken only about people who I know. There are obviously in hundreds right now, but yes, the number should be in thousands so that they can influence lakhs. And you always need that one small 1 crore, 2 crore who can then become the thought leaders. But yeah, it's becoming difficult for the communists and Islamists to counter such voices. So either they'll troll them or they'll just ignore them. But
Mhm.
uh, it's becoming tough now to even ignore them. So it's a good time. Many years back, you wouldn't have not be able to do this without internet and social media tools which are available.
Mhm. Well, I do largely agree with you, about it getting slightly easier. You just mentioned what Omar had to face, and then we've seen what happened to Saad Anwar in
Saad
Bhiwandi.
Ansari.
Saad
Mm,
Ansari, sorry. And, this is it. There's either street violence like Omar faced, or there's state violence like Saad faced. When people try to speak up and plainly just be patriotic, and you don't see that, like, American Muslims are allowed to be American, UK Muslims are allowed to be English or Scottish, well, mainly English, but although there's not a lot of that, I think that they're a lot more ghettoized in the UK as opposed to the US. But in India, you have to very often, you will see, like you mentioned, the idea of Pakistan lives rent free in a lot of their minds. And that's something that needs to be apparently accepted by the majority Indians, which seems like it's a national security issue, because extra national affiliations will always cause a lot of conflicts. And so while the situation is much better and we are actually having these conversations, I think there's some way to go before this critical mass that you mentioned is achieved. And I'm really appreciative of all of these names doing what they do.
Yeah, see, one thing what I've noticed with all these voices, they are very clear that the biggest threat to the existence of the idea of India and the territorial integrity and to the civilizational nation state of India, which is like lasted for 5,000 years in the onslaught of expansionist ideologies, is Islamists and communists who together form a very, very lethal cocktail with pan nationalistic ideologies. And India, in that way, is a underdog. This whole bogey of majority minority, but the majority is the global minority. And even within the country, it's not a majority across the length and breadth.
Mm.
So one thing, that clarity is there, and hence these voices are very important that way, because even for a youngster who can get swayed away by the propaganda of likes of Rana Ayub and Arfa Khan Sherwani, and likes of Kavita Krishnan, the comrades and the Islamists getting together. At least now they are seeing the ones taking them on who come from their same identity. And what they're resisting, the biggest service they're doing first to the community, then to the country, is that they are fighting this toxic victimhood which is injected in young minds, because that is
Mm.
the modus operandi of both the terror groups and these very writers. So it's just like they are the foot soldiers, pen soldiers when it comes, because
Mm.
one injects it through words, and then he becomes ripe to take battle against
Mm.
the state. And the same people go for holidays. Like Rana, in the last 2-3 months, just in the last 2-3 months, has had a 5-star holiday in UK, US. She flew business class in Etihad. She, of course, had her holiday in Kerala. Now nobody would have grudged that, but if it was built on really hard work, like guys like Mohammad Siraj, the cricketers, and all, this is all built on the blood of those youngsters who they incite. Now at least those youngsters have voices like us to say that don't get into this victimhood, because at the core of the victimhood idea was what Pakistan was ultimately, that you'll always be victims at the hands of the polytheistic heathen majority, right? But when you have all your rights secured as religion, you will have all your political rights, legal rights, and you have your religious rights, democracy, and all. Then in that case, your endeavor should only be to make your house better. Of course, uh, personal cases of injustice and all of that's fine, but that cannot be interpolated to the entire nation. Once you have a sort of an objective, balanced view that first I speak against the extremist of my community, and not like when Rana even justifies that, because that too is a game, then you will get a balanced worldview. Like, this is one of the greatest countries to live in as a Muslim as well, because other countries with Muslim majority countries don't have that greater track record of human rights and liberties and all that. Just yesterday on Twitter, even though I do appreciate Mohammed bin Salman bringing in some incredible reforms in the
Mm.
history of the religion, but like when it comes to dissent, you look at that poor
Yes.
woman. She's hardly 34-year-old. She must have just tweeted some dissidents ka tweet, and now she's 34 years ke liye she's been thrown into the jail. Poor thing, has 2 children and all. Now, contrary to that, when you see the Islamists here like Arfa, Rana, who don't deserve it, they are the ones who are spewing venom. And imagine if they were in countries like these. Also, at the same time, like I said, you have the likes of Nikat Zareen, who through her blood,
Mm.
sweat, and coming through poverty, and coming through a community where she was must have not been easy for her to take up boxing, is winning laurels, and she won the gold in Commonwealth Games, and she's such a pride of India, as the Prime Minister himself said. So there is so many success stories of Muslims like that in cricket, in football, in hockey, you name it, and thousands of sectors. So I think the biggest service we can do is to tell the youth that there is everything, but don't get into sucked into this dangerous victimhood industry in which the communist and Islamists both will use you as pawns, and you'll die, your parents will suffer, your life will get ruined. But you can always talk about your issues through a lot of sense of balance, through legal mechanisms, everything.
Mm.
But understand and appreciate in the neighborhood of India or in the global, what is it that the privileges as an Indian citizen you get. So that is one of the many things that drives us to make a better India, and to repay the debt of being born and brought up in such a great civilization.
I think what you mentioned about Rana and Alpha. This is what
Sorry,
Munib
just to cut you short, Arfa was holidaying in Hawaii. I mean, she of course
Hawaii.
went under the Hawaii, like she was posting up these great pics, and this was
Mm,
just right after she initiated the blasphemy rioting, and two Muslim kids who didn't even know what they died for, they died. So nobody then asks na कि क्या थे वो बच्चे. I remember I read somewhere that the youngster who died, not even a youngster, student, kid, 16-year-old, उसका result आया था बाद में, and he
हाँ,
used to tell her अम्मी that I'll make a better life. Nobody
right.
remembers all that. ये थी हवाई में कोई कॉन्फ्रेंस था यही कम्युनिस्ट वर्ल्ड सिस्टम का एंजॉयिंग. वो यूएस में थी, ये चिल करते हैं, बहुत पैसा कमाते हैं, पब्लिकेशंस में गाली देनी होती है इंडिया को बाहर, और उसी को एस्पिरेशन दे देते हैं और खुद मस्त जीते
Mm,
हैं, और बाकी इंश्योर करते हैं कि कम्युनिटी को कॉन्स्टेंटली ऐसे चीज में रखे कि आप सोचो ही मत, बस ये मतलब ये हिंदू मेजोरिटी आपकी दुश्मन है, तो कभी वो बीजेपी बन जाएगा, कभी आरएसएस, कभी कांग्रेस, लेकिन कभी न कभी भी आपको ये दिमाग में नहीं रखेंगे कि एक बैलेंस दृष्टि से दुनिया को देखो, और देखो कि आपके पास क्या है और क्या नहीं है. और खुद उनके सपोर्टर्स में भी वो क्षमता होती नहीं है ना कि समझने की कि क्या मैं मतलब ये कह रही है कि तुम जुल्म में हो, खुद मतलब इतनी अच्छी लाइफस्टाइल है, वो अपना भी नहीं सोच पाता कि मेरी तो रोजमर्रा की जिंदगी अच्छी है, ऑल दैट. तो ये तो चलता रहता है एकदम.
so I think they were. I heard this term. I think on my channel for the first time with Munib calling them intellectual terrorists, and I thought that
Yes,
was the
vultures,
most.
vultures and terrorists. Yeah,
Absolutely. So because it's so frightening the kind of impact people like this can have. Like you said, she's holidaying in Hawaii. Rana is celebrating her birthday in the Etihad first class, business class, first class flight, and the consequences are faced by children
yeah.
across religions, and there is no accountability. After all, the Supreme Court of the country also says that she's run away with only 10 or 12 crores. It's hardly it's such a petty sum that she does not need to be arrested for money laundering. So
Yeah, the COVID
uh,
crowdfunding where she duped a lot of people.
yes,
That's
so
one of the very
it's
smaller
playing
crimes
out.
that she does in the larger. Her thing every day is ki with that injection, just keep on pumping to the average Indian Muslim that you are a victim at the hands of the Hindu majority, and take the crimes of the Hindu majority, interpolate it with the entire community, take the crimes of the Muslim and apologize for it and say कि you done reaction. That is it. But देखो एक चीज ये भी है ना कि एट द एंड ऑफ द डे दे आर वल्चर बिजनेस प्लेयर्स, तो जब तक वो सेंटिमेंट खुद में भी नहीं है मासेस के वह देख सी यू कैन ओनली एक्सप्लॉइट समथिंग इन समवन जो उसमें ऑलरेडी है. तो
Mm,
ऑल्सो इम्पोर्टेंट टू से कि इट्स नॉट ऑल्सो कि आई वुड कंप्लीटली ब्लेम देम. अगर वो सेंटिमेंट नहीं होता तो वैसे वल्चर्स भी नहीं होते, तो
mm,
कम्युनिटी को
mm.
भी
I was going
इंट्रोस्पेक्शन
to
करने
ask
की
that.
जरूरत है. हाँ, कम्युनिटी को भी इंट्रोस्पेक्शन करने की जरूरत है. वन ऑफ माय रोल मॉडल्स द ग्रेट पद्म विभूषण लेट मौलाना वहीदुद्दीन खान, वन ऑफ द ग्रेटेस्ट मॉडरेट इस्लामिक स्कॉलर्स. उनकी कई सारी किताबें मैं पढ़ता रहता हूँ, और एक हर किताब में इतना सारा विजडम था. और एक में वो कहते हैं कि ये टेररिज्म, ये गन्स की बात करते हैं, ये सब बकवास है. आप किसी नॉर्मल इंसान जिसमें वो थॉट नहीं है, गन दे दो, वो थोड़ी किसी को मार देगा. तो इट स्टार्ट्स इन द माइंड, और वही
Mm,
माइंड में आप इम्प्लीमेंट भी करते हो. तो यही है कि कभी कभी बुरा लगता है मुझे कि जो लोग इनके बहकावे में आके पूरी जिंदगी मनहूसियत की और एक कन्फ्रंटेशन की जीते हैं, लेकिन कभी कभी वो डिजर्व भी करते हैं ना, बिकॉज दे आर रेडी टू feel one with Rana and Arfa, and through them also live that anti-Hindu hatred which they put out.
mm.
So, ठीक है, maybe they deserve each other.
नहीं, ये आपने बहुत सही कहा क्योंकि अभी आई थिंक 2 दिन 1 दिन पहले ये एक वीडियो आया था जहाँ पे एक बांग्लादेशी बच्चा कह रहा था कि मुझे सौम्या सरकार से नहीं मिलना है, उनके फेमस क्रिकेटर, क्योंकि वो हिंदू है। वो बच्चा है, हार्डली मेबी 6 इयर्स ओल्ड, एंड ही हैड दैट क्लैरिटी ऑफ थॉट कि देयर इज़ द अदर। एंड ये जो शत्रुबोध बोलते हैं, वो चीज़ उसमें ऑलरेडी भर चुका है। जो कि आपको किसी में नहीं दिखेगा जब पूरी देश निखत जरीन और मोहम्मद शमी सिराज की तारीफ करे जा रहे हैं और उनको एक्स्ट्रा उनको ज़्यादा प्यार मिलता है। आई थिंक फ्रॉम ऑल ऑफ द पोस्ट दैट आई हैव सीन परहैप्स इज एनकरेज्ड बाय आवर overtly secular, हम लोग को दिखाना है कि we support Muslims, we're not anti anyone. So they get a lot of and well deserved pride and love from the country, but it's the exact opposite for those who are the Muslims who are indoctrinated and जिनको ये मदरसा में पढ़ाया जाता है, सिखाया जाता है बार बार, क्योंकि छोटे से बच्चे के दिमाग में ये कैसे आ सकता है। एंड ये हमने अर्तुगरुल होते हुए भी देखा था, वहाँ के जो बच्चे हैं वो लोग तलवारें लेकर बिहेडिंग कर रहे। पाकिस्तान में बुरखा में बच्चों को, लड़कियों को सिखाया जा रहा था हाउ टू behead somebody on a on an effigy. That is what was they were being trained to do at such a young age. So it's terrifying. इनको तो कोई कंट्रोल नहीं है ना, मतलब उनके थॉट्स पर। अगर ब्रेन वॉशिंग इतनी जल्दी शुरुआत हो जाती है तो फिर what is the how do you cushion against it? How do you have a buffer against it unless the state comes down heavily on the madrasas that are doing this?
Yeah, I applaud the state governments who are trying for modernization in this field. और जैसा कि इससे पहले भी मैंने कहा कि एक बिजनेस व्यापारी, इनके केस में वल्चर एक्टिविस्ट ही, लेकिन धंधा तो करते हैं एट द एंड ऑफ द डे। ये भी वही एक्सप्लॉइट कर पाते हैं, ये भी उसी से जी पाते हैं, राणा और अरफा, कि जिसमें इनको भी दिखता है कि देखिए ये स्मार्ट है, शातिर है, कि इनको पता है ये सेंटिमेंट है और अब्यूज करो। तो आप में ऑलरेडी विक्टिमहुड की भावना है, जस्ट द मियर एग्जिस्टेंस ऑफ द पॉलीथीस्ट इज ऑपरेशन। तो उसके आगे आप क्या ही फिर डिबेट करोगे, राइट? तो अगर वो फिर जान भी हथेली पे रख देगा तो आप कहोगे काफी नहीं, है ना? तो इनका बहुत अच्छा मोडस ऑफ ऑपरेंडी है कि करते क्या है ये कि मान लो किसी हिंदू एक्सट्रीमिस्ट ने कुछ कर दिया, ठीक है, तो आएंगे। कल ही मैं ट्वीट पढ़ रहा था, मतलब मुझे तो ब्लॉक किया हुआ राणा ने, कि अरे हिंदुओं शर्म करो, इज दिस व्हाट यू स्टैंड फॉर? जो गुजरात में बिल्किस बानो का गवर्नमेंट ने रेमिशन दिया है। अब आप आमतौर देखेंगे तो एक एवरेज हिंदू इज वेरी आउटरेज्ड अबाउट इट, ठीक है, और जो कि अच्छी बात है, दिस शोज अ ह्यूज ह्यूमन कॉन्शियसनेस, राइट? लेकिन उसी चीज को भी एक्सप्लॉइट करते हैं कि उनको पता है कि यहाँ भी वो सेंटिमेंट है, कि वो फिर ओवर कॉम्पनसेट करते हैं, है ना? तो एक्चुअली ये बहुत शातिर साइकोलॉजिस्ट, अच्छे भी हो सकते थे। तो फिर ये उस टाइम वो करते हैं, फिर जब अगर आप देखेंगे जब इस्लामिस्ट होगा, वो कुछ करेगा जिसकी वजह से किलिंग्स होंगी, तो उस टाइम कहेंगे कि यार तुम्हारी तो गलती है, एट द एंड ऑफ द डे, गुड और बैड, एवरीथिंग इज टू बी ब्लेम्ड ऑन द हिंदू। अब दिक्कत यह है कि हिंदुओं में भी ऐसे सारे लोग हैं जो सेल्फ लोदिंग को एनलाइटनमेंट समझते हैं। तो वो एक वही तो, मतलब वो भी एक दिक्कत है कि इतनी ज्यादा ओवर मोल्डिंग है कि उनको लगता है कि मैं अपने आप को गाली दे दूंगा एक मुस्लिम के सामने तो फिर वो बोलेगा वाह वाह, उसी की वैलिडेशन चाहिए, और वैसा है। तो ये सब तो है। आप बांग्लादेश में आप बात कर रहे थे सौम्य सरकार की, इतना अच्छा खेलता है, उनके लिए आई एम अ क्रिकेट लवर, और वो छोटे बच्चे की क्या गलती है? घर पे ही सुना होगा, और उस वीडियो में उसका फादर उसको ऐसे बोल रहा है कि जैसे अरे मैंने तुझे बोला ही नहीं है कभी, ऐसे एक्सप्रेशन से, तो मैंने तो बोला है। एक और चीज मैं आज ऑब्जर्व कर रहा था ट्विटर पे कि लिटन दास, एक और उनके हाँ, तो बेचारे ने अपनी एक पोस्ट की, माइनॉरिटी है उस देश में, मतलब एथनिक क्लिंजिंग तो उनकी पता नहीं कितने सालों से हो रही है, जेनोसाइड ही चल रहा है 30 साल से, और ऐसे भी रिपोर्ट्स हैं कि बहुत दुख होता है सुन के कि शायद 10-20 साल में कोई हिंदू वहां बचेंगे भी नहीं। तो लिटन दास ने कृष्ण जन्माष्टमी की बधाइयां, ग्रीटिंग्स डाली थी। अब 90 या 95% पॉपुलेशन है वहां मुस्लिम्स की, मुझे एक भी नहीं दिखा नीचे जिसने उसको विश किया वापस। और एक आए बड़े वही डिबेट करते हुए, यार तुम तो गलत कर रहे हो ये वो। तो बात मानसिकता की है यहाँ पे। अगर आप ओवैसी देखो, वो तो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन की आड़ में अपना एक इस्लामिस्ट प्रोजेक्ट चलाता है, और उसको उस चीज की आजादी है। लेकिन आपने कभी उनको देखा है दिवाली या होली पे किसी को विश करते हुए? उन्हें भी तो पता है कि उनकी कॉन्स्टिट्यूंसी में, हाँ, और वो उसको कहेंगे कि वो उनकी डेमोक्रेटिक राइट है, लेकिन हिंदू लीडर्स करते हैं, और वो ईद पे विश करते हैं। तो जब हम जैसे वॉइसेस सिर्फ ये विश भी कर दे कि होली है, जन्माष्टमी, तो फिर इस्लामिस्ट को लगता है कि वो भी है। लेकिन उनको एक सुप्रीमिस्ट पॉइंट चाहिए कि हम हमारा तो विश होता ही है, ये इनमें से तो सेक्शंस करेंगे, हम तो नहीं करेंगे। तो द पॉइंट इज कि मानसिकता वैसे उस हिसाब से इस्लामिस्ट की, चाहे वो किसी कंट्री में 1% हो, 10 हो, 20% हो या 90%, मानसिकता तो सेम है ना। तो यहाँ तो इसलिए नहीं ओपनली इतना हेट, उसके बावजूद भी इस्लामिस्ट और कम्युनिस्ट तो हेट तो दिखाते हैं हिंदूज के अगेंस्ट, राइट? एक बात होगी कि आप हिंदू एक्सट्रीमिज्म के खिलाफ खड़े हो, वो अलग बात होगी, लेकिन यहाँ दिखाते हैं। तो इसीलिए वो जो नाइव सेल्फ लोथिंग हिंदू है उसको तो समझना चाहिए, द नंबर्स डोंट मैटर, इट्स द माइंडसेट दैट मैटर्स। टेररिस्ट तो 200 ही होते हैं ना, 1000 ही होते हैं, किडनैपर्स भी कुछ ही होते हैं, हाईजैकर्स भी कुछ ही होते हैं, तो उनका नंबर थोड़ी डिफरेंशिएट करता है कि वो क्या करता है, या साइकोपैथ कुछ ही होते हैं। तो आई थिंक वो एक लॉजिकल रैशनल थिंकिंग भी होनी चाहिए, बट वही है, इतना घुसा दिया है मेजोरिटी माइनॉरिटी मेजोरिटी माइनॉरिटी, और उसमें भी इतना घुसा दिया है कि जो सबसे सबसे छोटी माइनॉरिटी है 70,000 लोग की, पारसी, वो तो माइनॉरिटी, वो तो बात ही नहीं, माइनॉरिटी मुस्लिम है जो कि 25 करोड़ है, जो कि सेकंड लार्जेस्ट कम्युनिटी, उसके बाद थर्ड लार्जेस्ट क्रिश्चियंस है 5 करोड़, चौथ लार्जेस्ट सिक्स है, लेकिन एक ही माइनॉरिटी है इंडिया में, तो और वो भी जहां बहुत सारे जगहों में मेजोरिटी है। तो बट यही है, एज नेशनलिस्ट उनको एजुकेट करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि भाई स्पेशली टू द सेल्फ लोथिंग हिंदू की, नहीं उतने खराब नहीं हो तुम, तुम्हें प्रूव करने की जरूरत नहीं है कि तुम
ये बहुत
सेक्युलर।
जरूरी काम है, ये बहुत जरूरी। No, I'll tell you, it's been hard. I have personal conversations with some people and I understand where they come from, क्योंकि हम जिस तरह से बड़े हुए हैं, if you are slightly middle class and urbanized, right? If you're perhaps if you've grown up in villages and in rural areas, you are more grounded because the community will celebrate certain events, will do certain things a certain way. बट यहाँ पर जो अर्बन कम्युनिटीज में एक जागरूकता की बहुत कमी है, क्योंकि हम लोग एक एस्थेटिक उससे करते हैं कि हाँ चलिए आज जन्माष्टमी, आज विश कर देते, आज साड़ी पहन लेते, उतना ही है, और फिर हम कहते हैं कि हाँ हमने बिंदी पहनी है, हम हिंदू हैं। और वो जो अंडरस्टैंडिंग है, वेदर इट्स स्पिरिचुअल, वेदर इट्स हिस्टोरिकल, इट्स कंप्लीटली मिसिंग, बिकॉज लुक, द ओनली टाइम दैट वी हैव टू लर्न अबाउट दिस इज ड्यूरिंग स्कूल, बिकॉज आजकल ऐसा होता है ना कि पहले जमाने में क्या होता था कि नौकरियां ऐसे होती थी जहाँ पे आप लोग को एक दूसरे से इंटरेक्ट करना होता था। अब हम बहुत बहुत मतलब thousands and millions may people just go in from a very protected environment of schools and colleges, and then go into another very protected environment of sitting in a cubicle with a screen in front of them, and their spare time is spent with another screen in front of them, which does build up a lot of validation and echo chambers circles like that. आप अपने फैमिली की सुनते हो, and एक बार आप एल्गोरिदम में एक चीज देखते हो तो वही दिखाया जाता है आपको बार बार, तो uska, it's very hard for people to break through that. And even whatever they vote, it's not political, it's merely that understanding, right? When you said that, ha Rana, हिंदू को वो बोलेंगे एक का करतूत लेकर वो सबको सुनाएगी कि हिंदुओं शर्म करो, पर जब मुसलमान के साथ होता है उनके लिए अपॉलजी आ जाती है कि ये तो मतलब एक बंदा रहेगा, आप सब कैसे बोल सकते हो, इतने सारे पीसफुल
नहीं,
लोग हैं।
उनका कैसा है कि हिंदू एक्सट्रीमिस्ट होगा तो 100 करोड़ हिंदूज को आप ब्लेम शेम करो, मुस्लिम एक्सट्रीमिस्ट होगा तब भी आप 100 करोड़ हिंदूज को ब्लेम करो
जी। बट ये
और
जो
उसमें से उसमें से जो कुछ करोड़ हिंदू है, छोटी संख्या बट इन्फ्लुएंशियल, जो रखते हैं नैरेटिव्स और इन सब चीज, वो इस चीज को मानते भी है।
जी बिल्कुल, क्योंकि वो
मतलब
हिंदू है ना,
हिंदू एक्सट्रीमिज्म भी हिंदू की गलती है वो कहते हैं, और मुस्लिम एक्सट्रीमिज्म भी ही हिंदू की गलती है।
जी वो absolutely, frankly we are, see, a human being can't be secular, they are not supposed to be secular, because that's essentially saying that you're godless, you're atheist, which most people will not accept to being. A state is secular, a state cannot, but our state is not secular. Our state makes an absolute certainty that Abrahamic faiths, not even the Sikhs and Jains and the Parsi, Sikhs and Jains, Abrahamic faiths have more rights than the Indic faiths. Like Sikhism or Jainism or Hinduism, they're not allowed oversight over their religious institutions. They cannot have their educational institutions like madrasas. We do not have gurukuls anymore. Cultural institutions are state-owned, state-controlled. So, our state is not secular. And yet a person, which is it's not even a distorted definition, it's a lie. So that's something that a lot of people have imbibed merely due to a lack of influences like yourself, who is very clear कि हाँ भाई मतलब Hindu होते हैं, and they have the right to not just practice but to have an ideology and a culture that belongs to this country and has existed for thousands of years. So that's something that's lacking. ये जो I had this conversation recently, and somebody brought up casteism, and it's not like they understand casteism about a different religion. And this is not just in India, by the way. Muslims are casteist in Saudi, in the UAE, in several other majority Muslim nations, right? And this, I'd gone through a lovely paper that built on how far they are descended from the prophet. That is the idea of casteism. One is the occupational thing, but also how far related you are from the prophet and his descendants. So that is how a lot of Muslim castes are also built. Now, essentially, this is a European definition. It has to do with class, and instead of comparing our jati system with other Asian class systems, we've distorted the entire meaning. And of course, it's fed into a lot of narratives where casteism is exploited by a lot of Hindus as well. Now, when somebody does something wrong, typically you don't say, oh, Muslims are at fault or Christians are at fault, because that's going to turn out to be bigoted. Yet Hindus themselves do not find this to be bigoted when they assign this one, an instance of discrimination to an entire population of an entire nation. They don't feel that, you're gaslighting a community, majority of who have nothing to do with this incident. But you just say, because you witnessed it yourself, it's a living experience for you. But other communities do not tie their living, like with the bishop, with Francis, I think, Frank Municulal, the rapist who was garlanded and was celebrated for being released and had no accountability for his rape. Nobody says that Christians are this way or Christian clerics are this way or something like that, but you would see those kind of narratives in the Indian media a lot about Hindu people. कि हिंदुओं ने किया मतलब सब हिंदुओं को, it's their guilt of the community, whereas that's not how the rest of the world sees it. So that's definitely something that a lot of people need to internalize, that it's not the fault of a community, it's not the fault of a culture, it's the fault of the individual as such. And that's the only way also to address the issue, because आप blame करके क्या कर लोगे? You're not solving it.
Right.
Nobody's solving it. Whoever can
Two
solve
things.
it will do so at an individual level, right? So
Two things. There was a very tragicomic thing some months back. There was a Aaj Tak sports debate. There was Shoaib Akhtar from Pakistan and Harbhajan Singh from India.
I remember.
Yeah, it was very funny. So Harbhajan Singh said to him, and all that brotherhood and naive utopian thinking. We are one. We are same. Hamme kya fark hai, right? And this is a guy from a powerful nation and now the fourth largest economy in the world, talking to a guy from a failed state, and he tells him we are one, and Shoaib Akhtar tells him no, I believe in the two nation theory. And look at the ideological clarity of Shoaib Akhtar. Right? It's not a statement on the person. As a person, he might be really great, right?
Yeah.
He's very entertaining with his speeches and all, but he is very clear that what his nation stands for, that he's not similar to Harbhajan. And Harbhajan is telling him, no, you are. He's insisting and telling him, but we are one. That's one thing. The second thing, you look at Owaisi. It's not that Owaisi feels for the Hindu Dalits, but the alliances that get made by Owaisi is that we feel for the Hindu Dalits. Now, why he does that? Because in his Abrahamic worldview, the polytheist is the other, anyways. So even if the internal reforms the polytheist is making, intellectual honesty would have demanded that Owaisi says, oh, I'll also talk to the lower caste, which is the Pasmandas with them. But that reform of the ideological opponent is also something he sees as a fissure which he can exploit. And the useful idiots on the Hindu side are more or less willing to do those alliances. But it's not that as the one who's already seen you as the other is actually very concerned about that Dalit. He's not. It's like, मान लो आपका कोई आइडियोलॉजिकल ओपोनेंट है, वो कह रहा है यार मैं थोड़ी सेल्फ रेफॉर्मेशन कर रहा हूँ, ठीक है. अगर आप में सच में इंटेलेक्चुअल ऑनेस्टी हो, लाइक हाँ यार मैं भी अपने घर पे करूंगा, बट देन यू विल यूज इट टू से हाँ तू तो है ही खराब, ये देख कैसे तो अपने बंदे को कर रहा है, But he should have talked to him, raised the issue of Pasmandas, which actually he's in fact gone to the court also saying that there should be no reservation for the Pasmandas, and they don't like that politics because that is really going to politically damage them if the moment comes up really big time, right? So what kind of a logic is this, that a higher caste Muslim feels for the pain of a lower caste Hindu,
So this can,
and he
but not
doesn't feel
something.
for? Yeah, what kind of a logic is that? I mean, it's not, are you really telling me he really feels for the Hindu? He doesn't. History has shown to us that the historical blunder likes of Jogendranath Mandal did, who was a parallel figure to Bharat Ratna Dr. B.R. Ambedkar ji. But Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was intellectually so astute and such a brilliant and genius
Mm,
that he realized that how much ever caste के हिसाब से आप देखो इसको, और उनमें भी caste oppression है, लेकिन the religion overrides it by a Himalayan, like,
mm, mm,
inter this
mm,
uh, you know Himalayan layer over it.
mm,
एंड
mm,
जोगेंद्र नाथ मंडल फेल टू जिन्ना एंड सेड कि हाँ हाँ चलो भाई, तुम वो तो कास्ट से ही मैं लड़ रहा हूँ और तुम भी.
mm,
when he went there and he saw the massacre of Hindus there in
mm,
Pakistan and Dalits, and he had to come back, and it was a life of
mm,
oblivion which he later lived. But
mm,
Ambedkar realized what the issue was. How much ever if he would have felt within his community that the atrocities at that time, अब तो बहुत फर्क हो गया है.
mm, mm,
लेकिन अब वही है ना कि अगर फिलोसफिकली देखा जाए विदाउट एनी जजमेंट्स, इट्स जस्ट हाउ
mm,
सिस्टम्स ऑपरेट. एक की फ्लूइडिटी इतनी ज्यादा है कि वही फ्लूइडिटी उसको ले डूब जाती है. एक की स्टबर्ननेस और रेजिस्टेंस, क्लोजनेस इतनी ज्यादा है कि वही उसका घुटन बन जाता है. आई
mm,
थिंक एक बेटर सृष्टि के लिए इट्स इम्पोर्टेंट कि थोड़ी वो फ्लूइडिटी अपनी कम करे और थोड़ा ये अपने क्लोज सिस्टम्स खोल दे. और वो इंडिया ही कर सकता है, बिकॉज उसमें ये सारे 6 बसे हुए हैं.
जी,
So
जी.
I think the way, if you see it as a physics thing,
Mm,
Abrahamic systems being too closed and not healing anything for the polytheist being too fluid and welcoming even the worst of ideas, somewhere there needs to be a sense of balance. And that is
mm,
where nationalists actually can come in, because they are standing for territorial integrity, civilizational identity, but can speak to both sides where you need to, guys, you know, calm down and relax a little.
mm. No, I absolutely appreciate your logical clarity, intellectual clarity on these issues, Khalid, because you've consistently made these same points. And I wish that a lot of viewers do draw inspiration from this. And, of course, most of them do watch your channel, I'm sure. But it's impressive, and I hope that more and more Muslims start talking like this. So you know that you will never get, or at least for a long time, not get the space and the money and the funds that Rana Ayub or Arfa Khan Sherwani or anybody else does, right?
The
Only
nationalist Indian who's standing up for the nationalistic Indian, whether he's a Hindu or a Muslim, who's standing up for that lone one remaining polytheistic majority country out of the 200 countries on the planet, is a micro minority in battle with the Abrahamic world of 50 Christian majority, 50 Muslim majority, then the communists. So you can imagine the ideologies which are there on the other side and what you have here. And then you have those ideologues even within the traitors within the country. So there is only conviction and your lived reality. Once or wo ek level ka one wishes India reaches that stage, and those assets are nurtured. But civilizationally देखा जाए तो यार आप एक underdog ही हो. But it's fun, no? Like standing up for your motherland when you know you're the underdog again in this civilizational worldview. And it is something worth saving. I always say this because there must be something really special that this remains the only polytheistic citadel which has not been conquered. So, and it
that's
is
a
because of that.
because a lot of people talk about how we should be victims, and we are victims of several genocides historically, which is true. However, we do tell the story of resistance, right? Major resistance, and of course it's been wiped out from history textbooks. How so a lot of people think that the British came and took over from the Mughals, etc. They don't realize that it was the Marathas that had the largest empire at the time. Aurangzeb had wasted most of the empire away after reaching the peak. He couldn't control any of it. Everybody rebelled, and it was the Marathas who controlled most of the territory, and the British took it back. And they were staunch civilizational leaders who were very certain that a temple, I think I heard Dr. Ranganathan mention this on a talk, and there was a temple that was destroyed in Tamil Nadu, and Shivaji Maharaj himself went He didn't just send people, he himself went, and there was a temple destroyed and a mosque was built over it. He razed the mosque, he rebuilt the temple, and he ensured that, the deity was worshipped again in Tamil Nadu. So that is who the British took over the reins of the country from. And it is a story of resistance. And I think a lot of new I loved watching RRR, because it kind of told a story of resistance, which is missing because we can't keep complaining and being victims of what happened to us. Because yeah, it's 200 years of colonization, it's intermediate invasion, but as a nation, like you said, 5,000 years of civilization. That's got to stand for something. We still have digs being uncovered. Sonali mein ye hua tha. There were women and men who were warriors. They were buried with their weapons. We have a rich history. Rakhi Garhi mein, we had so many things, so much history, so much civilization, where the rest of the nations were hardly born. Nothing in their present state, but we definitely had a lot of history to look back to. And I think you're right about India being the center of, it's the only stand against the rest of the ideologies because it's resisted for so long, and we can only hope that she continues to resist for longer. I will say though that I think civilizationally Indonesia is a really good. I think it's a very good example to look at. Now I know it's majority Muslim. I know they couldn't resist a lot of the civilizational tyrants that came through. The state, however, is much more protective of their culture than
True.
other
No, no,
than
that credit goes to Indonesia, relatively moderate Muslim majority country, and they do have multiculturalism in the true sense. In a lot of parts of Jakarta, I had a lot of Christian friends from there, and at very, like very rich. Of course, economic disparity is huge. That's a different topic. But also the fact that you can be a Muslim in Indonesia and have the Indonesian note, have a Ganpati, have their national airlines Garuda named after Lord Ram's this flight and all that. So they are very comfortable with that. And I think once Indian Muslims also realize that culture is different from religion and they need not make a confrontation of it under the influence of pan-Islamist ideologies, they can really live a life of coexistence. But that is the start they have to make, not the other side, because the other side is majority is ensuring that you're leading a free life as much as possible, right? So I think that is there. And also other thing is, like I said, whether it was Australia, whether it was America, or South America, the polytheistic indigenous tribes have been wiped out. There's not a trace. So the only polytheistic country in the planet out of 200 countries just remains one. That's India, Bharat, and it has 8 major world religions in it. And from centuries, even before the so-called enlightened, the Renaissance happened in the West and all. So worth at least speaking about it time and again and ensuring that it gets its due. And when you're getting all your religious freedoms in every religion, then if you're still in a state of constant confrontation, then that is the ideology to be tackled, not the one which is resisting that.
That's very well said. So speaking of Rana Ayub, we've done a lot of discussions on her, and I know she's one of your favorite.
She's blocked me now. I only get to see her screenshots.
Right. She had to delete her tweet wishing one decent thing she did was at least without even mentioning Islamism or terrorism or any of the
She had to
ideological.
delete that, and because the supporters
Well,
went
and she
wild
even
and they were like very hard.
had to delete that.
See,
So
like
what
I
is
said, no, she's a very at the end of the day, like I said, she knows her audience really well. So sometimes, like I said, it's just that they deserve each other, right? She knows it well. Like like in everything, like I said, they have a very template, because I know these people. I was a fan of all this, right, at one point. So I'm like that lover who's jilted. So I know it in and out, and hence maybe I'm a very good critique of them. It's a very simple thing. Uh, few extremist Hindu acts in a country of 100 crores, they attack a Muslim, and rightly the Muslim would feel that, oh, this is wrong. Interpolate it and say कि सब ऐसे ही है, majority of them. तुम्हारे करे in larger numbers, say it's a reaction, and then within that play their game. So not surprised. And she's done much worse. She like all the terror secessionist movements of the country, whether that's the communists who run the most deadly through the Naxalites, where we
Hmm.
lose so many of our jawans. They back that because they know there's a constituency. They back everything like that. So at one point, yes, critical to call out for what they are, vulture, intellectual terrorists, as Raja Munib said. But second point is also that they do have a constituency, na, who are like who resonate with them. But the idea is to constantly challenge those thoughts and also put across the other ones that there are the Nikat Zareens and the Mohammed Shamis and the Mohammed Sirajes and many like that, and millions just ordinary lives doing.
They're
Sorry.
second class citizens. They are trolled by some fake Paki account, but it's the majority that's doing the trolling. Yeah. How do you feel as
No,
a second class citizen in Hindu majority Bharat?
matlab, I sometimes see the majority community as second class in the way they are over apologetic and they don't even have control over their temples. And yet they are supposed to be perpetually in an apologetic state. God knows for what. So
Hmm.
and so that is how I see it.
No, I would agree with you. I think that, and like I said, there's a lot of mental conditioning that happens in Hindu homes as well. There's a lot of guilt tripping about certain things. And look, frankly, a lot of folks who grow up seeing even a little bit of conservatism, and then they go into more open spaces such as colleges and are exposed to very leftist ideologies. That's when you start to watch a lot of media. That's when you start to have the freedom to own your time, and you are influenced by teachers even in that space. You don't have to move cities. Maybe you're going home at the end of the day, but you still come here and you feel a sense of freedom, and that's very natural for somebody in that age group, somebody in that state of being. And you've seen certain things that are not right, perhaps, or perhaps you just don't understand it. There is a sense of ritual sacredness. Your parents may not want to touch anyone, touch anything when they are doing their Sandhya Vandanam or doing their everyday sadhana. I would not want things coming in between as such. I'm not high caste as such, right? There's no casteism involved. It's merely a ritual purity that is mentioned, that is necessary for certain things. That being extrapolated and being fed into certain narratives constantly will make them turn against their own culture. Or they see a single incident and they hear these narratives. The conditioning is due to the reinforcement of certain things that they've been exposed to since childhood. दैट हाँ आप एड्स देख लो मतलब वो जो ब्रुक बॉन्ड रेड लेबल आई थिंक रेड लेबल की एड्स होती थी ना where the guy goes to buy a Ganesh Chaturthi pe he goes to buy an idol and the idol maker is Muslim and he just leaves but चाय मिलता है तब उनका मन चेंज हो जाता है कि नहीं ये मुसलमान भाई तो गणेश जी बना रहे हैं so that's the thing then you see a burqa clad woman who's inviting the very unfriendly Hindu couple next door. These are
The
ads
guilt,
like
the guilt tripping.
जे मतलब गैसलाइटिंग हर टाइप से आपके हिस्ट्री बुक से लेकर मतलब सिविक्स में तो कुछ नहीं पढ़ाया जाता है बट कुछ भी you have no exposure to your own culture except for what you see around you, and what you see around you is piecemeal. It's not an entire spiritual experience. You don't understand a lot by reading just one thing, right? It's a very vast religion with millions of texts already destroyed in fires lit by Alauddin Khilji, etc. So
एक
there's a
और
lack
चीज है
of
एक और चीज भी है ना कि मुझे तो हंसी आती है on those Hindus and Muslims and Christians who claim to speak truth to power and think oh we speak against Hindu majoritarianism and we speak against Hindu or the archaic practices and their digressive things. That's the most easiest thing to do in a system which duality of thought is its core. What's the big deal? You cannot take those chances with closed systems within Abrahamic
Right.
faiths, and you cannot do it in communist. Again a very cult-like thing. What's the big deal, यार? I mean, उसमें तो essence ही है duality of thought. But यही है कि we'll have to reach a stage where you'll have to understand that how can you have a dialogue between duality of thought and singularity of thought, because the singularity of thought by its sheer stubbornness and dedication will always constantly can make a place within the duality of thought. But the duality of thought, whereas personally is a very liberating thought, where you're not bound by one truth, and you can lead your life here rather than thinking 24/7 about the afterlife, and live it in its whole glory without any pressure. But at the same time, it doesn't have any boundaries around it. So those boundaries are important, because then you can have people within it who can easily be, you know uh, do things which are detrimental to that system. But no, ki there is no there is no uh, like there's no penalty as such ingrained in that system. And that is where you see the opportunists through historically you've seen such figures, right? So all that is there. We also were talking about the great iconic figures. Like I said, yes, as much as you don't need to be a jingoistic and say ki sab kuch golden tha and all, but at the same time you don't need to be self-loathing, in a sense of balance. So before pre-independent India, or before that also, arguably one of the greatest Indians ever was Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. I come from Maharashtra, and how proud and iconic should one feel about him? And but कितना कम ही chapters में होता है. There should be have been books about him in your history books, ICSE, CBSE, SS. एक chapter हो जाता है, and that's it. But you're looking at a man who, like, shaped up India and the kingdom, was like, and stories of valor and how he stood up. So as long as that ideological clarity is not there, and you're just putting him as another footnote in history, then you're not owning up and feeling proud. And it can't be either intense over glorification of a past, but neither should it be intense dislike and shaming. Once you find that balance, then I think that is that mid, which actually in the essence of Bharat is also the core thing of duality of thought. It can never accommodate just one singular truth, but at the same time, while accommodating many truths, it cannot make the mistake of accommodating ideas which even are an antithesis to the entire edifice only, and say and all that. So I think again, at the point of repetition, this is a question primarily polytheists should ask themselves. I mean, culturally, if you are a part of this nation, whatever be your religion, Islam, Christianity, you're polytheist culturally, right? The way we look, what we eat, the way we talk, what we wear, our friendships, everything. If you even feel that, then you'll suddenly realize, oh, a lot of gile shikwe against the country is wrong, because you won't see the other as the other, culturally at least. मान लो religiously you won't see. So I think they need to ask, no, ki yaar, there's something to is there, no, remarkable, that if there were polytheistic societies in South America, North America, Australia, just 500 years back, and if today not a trace remains, but yet you have the last bastion, which has not been conquered by the opposing ideologies, and it's not a judgment or a thing, it's just how the world operates, then might as well ensure that at least it stays for the next 1,000 years, if not for the next 100, 200 years. So what's the harm? And there needs to be no guilt, because that idea allows the other 8 major world faiths to exist within it, with all their liberties and with all their freedoms, and has resulted in 2 more faiths actually born in that idea itself, which is Buddhism and Sikhism, and Jainism, 3 actually. Yeah. So I don't know, yeah. After a while, people just need to chill out and be okay with their realities. And I understand it's tough. I mean, I've also, while growing up, I had a lot of things which but the conditioning keeps on, unraveling. You decondition one day at a time. But ओवरऑल ठीक ही तो, एक एवरेज इंसान की लाइफ अच्छी ही रहती है, सारे फ्रीडम्स इंडिया में मिलते ही है, अब उससे ज्यादा क्या फ्रीडम चाहिए? आई मीन, देखिए, लोग कहते हैं एक आइडियल लिबरल ऑर्डर, दैट यूटोपिया। अब इससे अच्छा आइडियल लिबरल ऑर्डर क्या होगा दुनिया में, कि अगर तुम इंडिया के किसी भी हिस्से में हो, except for the ones where the communists and Islamists have a stranglehold, rest any other part of India, you are growing up in your day-to-day interaction with 8 major world truths. There are 8 major world truths within 5 kilometers, you see them, and all are in contradiction with each other. Then there is a 9th truth where somebody doesn't want to believe in all of them, the atheist, right? That would be paradise, na? Ki you have everyone is still living in harmony, right? अब उसी को आप जहन्नम तुलने में पड़े हो, तो अगर आपको वो नहीं पसंद, that's the pinnacle, no, the so called, I mean, the pinnacle of what the West wants to aim. और वो तो सच्चाई है इंडिया की, वो तो आपको हर दिन, अब हाँ, आपको खुद कुछ चीज की कदर नहीं है, आप खुली आंखों से भी बंद हो के वो देख नहीं पा रहे हो कि यार, मैं जब चलता हूँ रोड पे तो मुझे एक गुरुद्वारा दिखता है, एक चर्च दिखता है, एक मंदिर दिखता है, एक मस्जिद दिखती है, एक जैन का मंदिर दिखता है, मुझे पारसियों का टावर ऑफ साइलेंस दिखता है, मुझे एथिस्ट दिखते हैं जो जिनको इसमें विश्वास नहीं करना। अब इससे ज्यादा यूटोपियन सोसाइटी क्या होगी? एक्चुअली यूटोपियन नहीं है, फैक्ट फैक्ट इज स्ट्रेंजर देन फिक्शन, ये तो है। अगर आप अब उसको उस चीज की भी आपको समझ नहीं आएगी, और मुझे एक कंट्री आप दुनिया में बता दीजिए जहाँ ये होता है, नहीं है, कहीं भी नहीं है।
नहीं
सो
है, पर मैं ये कहूंगी कि ये जो आप कह रहे हो ना, इट्स अ वेरी वैलिड पॉइंट, बट I've also come to realize that secularism and liberalism has come to mean Islamism, especially in context of India. That is all it means. It does not mean anything. And once
true, yeah, exactly. The Hindu liberal sadly feels that when he's talking about the Muslims, and he's talking about their legitimate concerns, and when he's taking on the extremists within who he thinks is the extremist, uh, is many times he's not even talking to people like us. He's not even talking to those Muslims who are in the Indian Army, who are in the forces, who just want to get out. He's always up with the Islamists who are basically wanting to balkanize the country. So that has come up to this. Of course, you cannot team up with the Islamists to fight your own thing. But like I said, as much as that requires an introspection from the Abrahamic side, it also requires from the Hindu side, because it's the only unique community guy who teams up with an Islamist to go and attack one's own Hindu. Like polytheist teams up with an Islamist to attack his polytheist rival, and that's what he calls secularism. So that I mean, and today also it's visible. You look at in West Bengal, what is it? If leave aside parties, labels, look at it from a civilizational. You have a polytheistic party. At least identity तो वो है ना, वो अलग बात है कि वो सच में है कि नहीं politics. Who are teaming up with an Islamist out and out, Jamaat, to gun for those Hindus who they are both against. But one is very clear ki why he is theologically against. The other mistakes ki for that short-term power gain.
actually, there's a lot of violence, and it's a communist people. They are used to decades of communism. And
True, true.
that obviously grates on your identity as such, because any, people who wanted to be safe and practicing, a lot of them have left. A lot of them have moved
Agree,
abroad, and a
agree.
lot
But
of
what
them
I'm
are
saying is
working
ki when a TMC cadre, TMC Hindu cadre, he's not necessarily a communist. I mean, I understand in the remnants and all that are
आइडियोलॉजिकली
there.
होने की जरूरत नहीं है, बट द काइंड ऑफ हूलिगन ग्रुप्स जो कम्युनिस्ट के
Agree,
होते थे अभी के नहीं
agree.
गए,
But what I'm saying is ki
they
when
found
you're
their
seeing it, when you're
martyrs.
seeing it in the
Their martyrs.
post-poll chilling Bengal violence, right? And when you see it from the identities, at that time it's a Hindu and a Muslim ganging up against a Hindu who they are opposed to. No?
True, true.
So,
But
so
I think that is very political at this point. I don't think it's very religious, because again, these are trade.
no, I'm
You know,
saying
you have
seeing it
worked.
on the larger canvas of civilization.
I see it,
Leave
but
the
then,
the political shelf life of it, 5 years, 10 years, 20, 50 years. I'm saying when you see it on the larger canvas of civilization, on the larger canvas of civilization, this is how you will see it. No, when like 100, 200 years later, you'll see, okay, so whether that was even some very rare Muslim BJP workers who too were assaulted, right? But that's an exception. But when you're seeing it, you're seeing a Jamaat member who's very clear that why he's going after the ideological opponent in BJP, why he's teaming up with the secular Hindu to go after the one he doesn't like. So, like I said, there is two-pronged solution. One is that, of course, we within Muslims form a critical mass, which I don't know whether will take a decade, century, but there is at least a small minority, which is hopefully becoming significant, taking on the extremists within and saying, no, we want coexistence with our Hindu brothers. But at the same time, the Hindus, that is something the Hindus battle is within. Ki we'll have to do this resistance against this so-called secular Hindu who feels it's okay to team up with an Islamist to go for a fellow Hindu who he doesn't align with.
I hear a lot about Indic knowledge systems. Perhaps that is something that will inculcate more of the culture towards the
Yes, yes,
Hindus.
yes. No, the
Uh,
Indic civilizational renaissance is something that has been happening for the last few years. And you can see voices which have come up, whether that's a Vikram Sampath, whether that's a Jay Sai Deepak, whether that's a Ravijit Iyer Mitra, whether that's a Kushal Mehra, whether that's a Sham Sharma, or many like that. So this is the right time. There is a renaissance, and and they all don't agree necessarily on everything. But what they do agree is that there needs to be an Indic intellectual system which resists the communist and Islamist literature and their ideological worldview. And within that frame, in the middle is where the patriots and the nationalists, everything comes in. So it is that exciting time where the Renaissance, of course, it's in motion. The it's the scholarly intellectual war also now that's been taken, because in even J. Sai Deepak in one of his discussion said कि ये लोग कहते थे कि कहाँ है तुम्हारा research, now he's produced a stellar book which is like some 500 references. I think he's written that book reading 500 books, and the arguments are like, you will have to really have an intellectual
ये
arsenal to.
तो है ये तो मतलब this is I think a myth where people say that the right wing does not have
They do have
intellectual
now.
heft.
They do. I mean, if you
And
look at just in the last recent years, नहीं उससे पहले भी है. इससे पहले भी है. There have been the Sitaram Goels and all. But I think maybe because of the internet and now the larger penetration, now it's more visible, and it's through the YouTube channels, it's through the satire, it's through the art, it's through the movies. But great time that way for the Indic civilizational conscious warriors and pioneers like Desai and all these guys who are saying no, the intellectual challenge shall be responded with an intellectual challenge.
No, so
And that's the most civil and non-violent way to go about it.
That is very true, and I think it's not so much a radicide as maybe a rediscovery, because how long ago was Sri Aurobindo Ghosh? His writings are in English. His
Right.
writings, a lot of his writings are in English, and he was educated as somebody who was not supposed to be Sanskritized. Not his father sent him away, so he does not get into the freedom struggle. He wanted to make him a Pakka Sahib, a brown Sahib like that, and he rebelled. His inner conscience and his nature made him discover spirituality, and what a shining beacon of that spiritualism he turned out to be after becoming a freedom fighter escaping from the British. But and his family locked up in Kalapani. But there's a lot of this that has been deliberately disappeared in order to create citation loops. Like when the people say that there's a lack of intellectual heft, it's not that there is genuinely a lack of intellectual heft. It is merely the lack of citation loops. Like Dr. Meenakshi Jain writes a book. How many people are referencing her and creating those circle loop? The Quint and the Scroll will publish everything one Suraj Yangde from Harvard says. They will publish, they'll take one clip and create 10
Yeah,
articles.
that boils down to the underdog, right? That's a challenge.
Absolutely, it's our fault.
That because
Absolutely our fault.
it's not our fault. Like I said, it's not our fault. Like as patriots, civilizational patriots, one fighting for the core essence of this land, you are just one amongst the 200. So you will have to figure out some jugad, the Indian jugad.
Yes.
But like
it requires
yeah, you will have to like go for hundreds of books and find the network here, because wahan se why will a pan-nationalistic ideology supporting guy support you? Because for him, though, you are the antithesis, you are the ideological force. But it's a great time. It's the best time to have the
absolutely I
intellectual power as patriots to stand for India and not feel ashamed and take pride also.
Okay, I think we've had very, very deep discussions, very heavy discussions. I am going to move on to something slightly lighter. I know cricket and Bollywood are your two loves.
Yeah.
How does it
Bollywood of 70s. I love Bollywood.
I know. How does it feel to see one of them being completely dismembered and, the flops after flops, the box office stunts that are being churned out?
At the core of it, poor content. I saw Laal Singh Chaddha, it was a torture on the nerves. I just had to, sit through the second half because I had to give my readers a review. Otherwise, I wouldn't have. It was funny. Amana was watching it in her city at the same time I was watching it. Even though she found it tad better than what I did, but it's a poorly made movie. I mean, content is poor. Similarly with Biggie, so that's a Biggie which failed, and that of course that does unnerve any industry. But an industry gets unnerved when there are 4 more Biggies before that within a span of 2 months, made on a budget of 150, 200 crores, expecting thousands of crores from these 4 movies. Whether that's a Prithvi Raj by Akshay Kumar, YRF, Yashraj, Films, which is the largest production house in Hindi film industry and one of the largest in India, right? In fact, I remember a decade back, Adi Chopra, who's the CEO, the director, and was named as among the 50 most powerful men in India, and that's correct. So Prithvi Raj flopped, and then Shamshera flopped with Ranbir, and it was years back when OTT came, and these guys still thought they could take the audience for granted. That's one. Second is that, they constantly got away in the civilizational churn about taking on only the majority community's practices and give a free pass to others. That's catching up with them, right? And they have enjoyed power and love of audience as Indians. So now if they're getting attacked, they're getting for same. Whether that's a Hindu Akshay Kumar or a Muslim Amir Khan, it's the same. Obviously, communist and Islamist will see it through the identities and, make it into one. But it's ironic, right? 35 years, it's not that they liked Amir because he was Muslim. They liked him irrespective. Now it's not like suddenly they see that, right? But if he's going to make movies where they feel later, no, it's just the liberty towards one faith and all, they're not. And it's not even a supremacist thing. They are even not telling you, no, तुम बाकियों की करो हमारी. They're saying अगर हमारी कर रहे हो तो बाकियों की करो, हमारी नहीं कर रहे हो तो बाकियों की भी मत करो. These guys feel even equality as oppression, right? And this is the most civil way of going about it. अब वो you have airheads like Arjun Kapoor saying कि we've tolerated enough, they've taken our chuppi for this. I mean, God, first of all, who watches your movies, Arjun? Like, nobody does. And this is more like a subtle threat of telling people, नहीं नहीं भाई डरा मत हम लोग आएंगे. So I think get good content, realize that people at the drop of a button on their mobile phones from Jhumri Talaya to Varanasi to the smallest of places like Gorakhpur to the biggest of cities like Mumbai have OTT where they watch world class content. So अब you can't come at 57 romancing heroines in the mid 20s, which anyways looks creepy, and then just dish out the same crap and think people. You make a good movie, whether that's masala also, but it should have something. And of course, as a civilization, they are not ready now for the double standards. But I think धीरे धीरे वो भी वो समझ ही जाएंगे, because I mean that thing is that's a reality they'll have to accept. And the false equivalence with Pakistan also is something they'll have to end.
Sorry? Yes. I don't see that happening though. I mean, if somebody has the absolute shamelessness when the Turkish president goes into the Pakistani parliament, makes hostile statements against your country, and then
he's paid for it now. I mean, it's a massive disaster. And I remember we spoke about no, even when we discussed Laal Singh Chaddha, we did 2 episodes. One was the review, but the one before that, in which we spoke about the reasons why a section of Indians are this, we spoke about that. And that was, we had a very unanimous, conclusion, me and Amina, that was something unpardonable. I mean, on that basis, if people say we don't want to watch, fair enough, because you're just going and, feeling it's okay to meet the enemy. You're not above the nation. And it's ironic, they need to now come down from this pedestal. Nation gives you the love, you become a superstar, and then you preach ki I am above nation and there's pan-nationalism and humanity and all that, right? So, ab nahi chalega. So, I think all this is a wake-up call for them. Uske baad bhi, if they want to live in their bubble and be condescending and look down, be patronizing, it's only going to harm them. But I don't think so, because definitely they are also people ultimately who are from the soil. So it's not that after such 4 major you look at Brahmastra, it's very Indic concept, and
I was going to come to that.
Yeah, so they Karan Johar that way knows ki why the wind is blowing, and
he went on the trend. But आप देखो तो पृथ्वीराज fail हुआ है, but उसके बाद रक्षा बंधन भी fail हुआ है. These are Akshay Kumar movies, right? It's not like you said. It's a matter of content. Now with Laal Singh Chaddha, for me, I watched वो जो scenes ट्विटर पर आ रहे हैं, बहुत मुश्किल से देखा मैंने, because my mother is a psychologist, clinical psychotherapist. She's worked with children who have disabilities and are differently abled. To see that being so disrespectfully portrayed, वो चार्ली चैपलिन की एक्टिंग कर रहा है किसके, and to say that आर्मी में ऐसे किसी को लिया है ना, there are so many uncontextualized problem areas there. मुझे और कुछ नहीं है, no religion issues, वो सब मैं आमिना जी का मान लूंगी, but and frankly I don't think it's the boycott religion based boycott that did anything. Hinduphobic chants, it was
at the end of the day, even Raksha Bandhan, the writer Kanika Dhillon, her some Hinduphobic posts were taken out, and then they paid for price for that. Today also that smaller actress Tapsi Pannu's movie has released, and who used to be one of my favorite directors, now he's like gone bananas. It's flopped. So if there's at the same time on Netflix there is a movie by Alia Bhatt and Shefali Shah with produced by SRK and all. It's doing really well. But from the trailer, you could see it's a good movie, darlings. So just give a good content. Don't preach. Don't try to feel this is like the civilizational churn से पहले India, where they could be हाँ एक का उड़ा दो दूसरे का नहीं, and you will be fine.
पर ये ब्रह्मास्त्र में you say I love the graphics of it, and I
It
wish it
looks
was
even
someone
more
else.
amazing in the theater.
Yes, in
Before
the
Laal Singh
theater I
Chaddha,
watched
when the
it.
trailer played, I really loved it.
I watched it before Rocketry. That's when it played, I think.
Right.
So I think so. But anyway, I did get to watch it, and it was very impressive. And it's interesting because the dialogues come across as something that will not be accepted very easily. Because कोई ऐसा ये जो dialogue होते हैं कहाँ पे आप ब्रह्मास्त्र के मतलब किस्मत का सिकंदर एंड शिव और ये सब जोड़ रहे हो, कोई सेंस नहीं बनता मतलब Brahmastra, do you no, it would require a beginning like rocketry had, which is a very normal. See, we've made everything taboo today. Everything Hindu is taboo, and this wasn't the case. I think even 25 years ago,
I
people
think
like
I
Javed
think
were a little more
it's
relaxed
changing at
about
such a pace that they will learn. But let's see. I mean, I'm keen to watch Brahmastra. So once we
it.
see it, I'll give you my
I'd
review.
be
Okay.
interested in seeing how that comes out. But what matlab jaan hi na, it's not because I'm not saying it's a wrong or morally incorrect. I'm just
I
saying
know
that
what you're saying. It doesn't go in sync with the texture of what you're trying to
like
say.
हाँ मतलब आप क्या
The
बोलोगे
language
इसको
texture is like Sanskrit meets Urdu.
हाँ मतलब आप कहीं और घुसा दो where it makes sense. You know, you normally use words that make sense. Like, you know, I might say दिलचस्पी instead of रुचि. But you know, it has to have context. आप ये जबरदस्ती force feed कर रहे हो ना
It's
ट्रेलर
like,
में उनकी
basically
कहानी
Iqbal's Urdu poems he's speaking in Sanskrit.
हाँ एग्जैक्टली आप वहां पे आप मतलब प्रॉपर चेस्ट हिंदी डालोगे तो थोड़ा अजीब लगेगा so there's definitely a sort of issue there and I think that a lot of audiences are being a little too picky and I don't think Brahmastra will flop because like I said the graphics are brilliant. I think they're looking to do a multiverse sort of thing from what I hear. You know, it has the potential to become a universe of its own. So
It's a
that'll
trilogy.
be
I mean, they'll definitely
right,
be hoping first one does well and it's made on a massive
right,
scale.
right.
But let's see. I mean, it's
Uh,
coming out next month. How it fares.
yeah, yeah. But it's interesting that even despite these flaws, they have gone in for something so starkly Indic in you know
Right.
nature. That apne naam hi Brahmastra rakha hai, and you've gone with the idea of reincarnation and things like that. So it'll definitely be something interesting, and maybe it plays out. But I think you know I'd like to ask you about what you think if Film City moves to Noida. You know, that's a secondary
I
place home.
don't have any thoughts on it. I mean, as
Okay.
long as they make a good film city and
Mm.
people
Do
make
you
good
think that it
movies.
will churn out more content, better content? You know, like I think I heard Vivek Agnihotri say that you know there are people who travel from UP, and a ton of people come from Haryana, UP to Bombay to pursue their dreams and get nowhere. And there's a lot of trafficking. There's a lot of bad, you know, culture that had intermingled with the underworld, and they might not be so exposed to it in Noida if a new hub for movies is made. So do you think that
And
affects
always
the
good to
quality?
have multiple centers where people in a
Mm,
large nation with so much of population and less opportunities, now they're increasing. It's always good to
mm,
have that. I don't have a per se like a thing cultural
mm,
landscape ka hoga maybe, but see, again, I think there was a good post one of my FB friends, Abhidas. He said, as much as you want Bollywood to course correct and
mm,
ensure where you register your message, at the end of the day, you cannot want go to another extreme and wanting the Hindi film industry to kind of no, now we're going to go against everything and anything, because ultimately, what were they also? What are we also? We are products of our times, and some of our challenge those things and then take different positions and start viewing it as an outside. But then nowadays I find it a little silly also. They'll go back decades back, you've made your point, okay, this used to happen, this is not a pattern we should be following, but then just indulge in presentism, as if मतलब खुद भी वो उसी 90s में तब भी वो वही सोचते थे, तब भी उनको वही दिखता था, right? I think they need to
बहुत
resist
सही
that
बात
also.
है आपने ये तो
Yeah,
है कि
matlab
हम
you
लोग को
cannot become like your ideological opponent, the worst amongst your ideological opponent, and say कि नहीं, now we've tasted blood, now we're going for everything and anything. अरे भाई क्यों?
no, but I
मतलब
think it's necessary to call out those. You know, we consume them very
no, of
innocently
course,
without
of
without
course, of
knowing,
course. But
and
what I'm
we
saying is कि once you won your thing
mm,
against your opponent, and you made your point, and then you can win them over. But because वो भी वही है, हम भी वही हैं, right? So
I would have a different point, different take on this, mainly because you see the Ajmer Dargah issue.
hmm,
Now, Hindus finally came across the history of what the Dargah had meant. How many
hmm,
rapes had happened there, how much conversion what had happened there. Kanhaiya Lal's murderers essentially got a lot of support, physical, tangible support from the Khadims there.
hmm,
2 weeks फिर
hmm.
वापस से बढ़ गया ना वहां का, बिकॉज फोमो होता है कि हम टूरिस्ट है, बिना देखे कैसे जाएं हम,
No,
चलो
no.
अंदर
See,
आते
that 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 ideological pressure and always
अगेन एंड अगेन, मुझे नहीं लगता
true,
कि
true.
ये
I'm saying that ideological pressure to be there, to constantly raise that and acquaint people that this is what you are normalizing is one thing. What I was talking was specifically about movies. That now you made your point. Definitely poor quality, also poor content, also ensured LSC, LSC. But even if it was good, well made, you could see that the figures would have been half the profits, because of the boycott. But what I'm saying is, ki in that also there has to be one time where handles who've done that, who've kind of made that mass influence and got the कि नो कि where to stop. And like I said, sometimes you can't go beyond an extreme कि यार 90s में ये हुआ था, ठीक है,
अब यार
आपने वो भी
कंटेंट
दिखा
तो
दिया.
बनाना ही है,
हाँ, वही मैं कह रहा हूँ ना कि
तो
वो फिर एक
उनका भी थोड़ा
हाँ
धंधा है तो
कि फिर वो
कंटेंट
कहेंगे कि 90s में ऐसा हुआ था तो तब भी ये ऐसे ही थे, तो आप कैसे थे. लाइक वी सेड यू हैव टू बी इंटेलेक्चुअली ऑनेस्ट. नो, वी सेड अभी जब वो आमिर खान का भी स्टेटमेंट 2015 का इंटॉलरेंस का, नाउ इट वुड बी एब्सोल्यूट हिपोक्रेसी ऑन माय पार्ट टू से कि यार तब मैं, यार दिस इज डिस्गस्टिंग, और मैं भी तो वही सोचता था तब, राइट. तो मैं क्या, अब मैं कैसे उसको कॉल आउट कर सकता हूँ, राइट. हाँ, अब मैं कह सकता हूँ कि उस टाइम मेरा जो व्यू पॉइंट था, ऐसे इन्फ्लुएंस था, ये मेरे पास नहीं थे तथ्य, और मेरा भी माइंड ऐसे शेप्ड अप था. तो once you've done that, once you have won your ideological victory small, no one's saying you stop it, no one's saying you don't stand up for what you stand for. But after a point, you can't be like everything up. You can't see presentism beyond a point becomes then destructive. It yields no result. So what is presentism? Like if I take like यार ये 60s के लोग कैसे थे यार, वो तो ऐसे वुमेन को ट्रीट कर, अरे तब की मोरालिटी वो थी यार. यू आर नॉट बिकमिंग सम एनलाइटेंड सोल बाय सेइंग वो वैसे तब थे, वो तो तुम्हारे फिर पेरेंट्स ही वैसे थे ना. कल को मेरे बच्चे 20-30 साल पहले बात बोलेंगे, अरे ऐसे मेरे पापा सोचते इस चीज के बारे में, जिसको फिर लेटर गलत. आई एम सेइंग दैट आल्सो, दैट चेक एंड बैलेंस नीड्स टू बी देयर इन द हेड.
अभी तो श्रीनगर में भी मूवी हॉल खुल गया है, आइनॉक्स खुला
Next
है.
month, next month it's releasing. Fingers crossed, because it used to be a very dynamic, hustling, bustling liberal society. 89 se pehle it had 16 theaters. Nightlife was very popular. Women would walk 12:30 post late night shows with a lot of jewelry, and they were very safe. And then the theaters were burned, closed down, and then when they tried to open them in 96, 99, there was a grenade attack. So fingers crossed. Hopefully, the kids of this generation will see a life which their grandparents saw, because the generation before that screwed it up all. We've lost 32 years and a generation. Hopefully, this generation will see a better normal life.
Well, Khalid, thank you so much for joining me today. I think it's been a fascinating conversation as always, and I definitely
Thank
look
you.
forward to more. But I will also link your review of Laal Singh Chaddha because I
All
thoroughly
right,
enjoyed
sure.
it.
Thank you.
And
Thank you. Glad you enjoyed it.
absolutely. Khalid, thank you so much again for joining us, and look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me, and all the best.